Honkai Star Rail is a turn-based RPG brought to you by HoYoverse, the makers of Genshin Impact. Being familiar with Genshin is going to make your learning process a lot easier. So let's start off with one of your first choices, the main character. Just like in Genshin, we get the choice between a male and female main character known as the Trailblazer this time instead of the Traveler, who is also capable of changing their elements, which also changes their path. What's a path, you might ask? Well, there's a big difference between Genshin and Star Rail. There are no weapon types. It doesn't matter whether your character uses a gun, a scythe, a big guitar case, or a giant robot that will come and beat the daylights out of whatever dares touch your precious little Clara. The weapons a character visually wields are purely cosmetic. What actually gives them the stats are light cones, which are tied to a character's path. A character is going to have one of 7 different paths: destruction, the hunt, erudition, harmony, nihility, preservation, and abundance. Essentially sustain, DPS, and support. The roles under each path on screen are definitions that I gave them with help of the in-game definitions of each path. And each category more or less has opposites. For harmony's buffing, nihility debuffs the enemies. Preservation works on preventing health loss, while abundance works on restoring health loss. The hunt is single target, while erudition is AoE, which leaves destruction a little bit of an odd one to specifically define because some of them are tanky bruisers, others are just bursty damage dealers, but generally they are pretty capable in most DPS situations. The next major defining trait of every character is their element. Just like Genshin, there are 7, but they're not the same. We have physical, which is actually considered a main element this time, fire, ice, lightning, wind, quantum, and imaginary. The elemental list of Star Rail is very similar to Genshin's. We have some new ones and some old returning ones, but the main difference here is there are no elemental reactions to worry about. Instead, enemies have weaknesses, and only their elemental weakness can deplete their toughness bar. Once the toughness bar is fully depleted, the enemy will be broken. It will stop whatever action they were doing, which in some cases can be extremely beneficial. So with this in mind, it is still important to diversify your party in some regards, but if you're familiar with areas, you can also stack elements that you know many enemies in the area are weak to. One major difference here is there is no elemental resonance in Honkai. Let's go over skills now. As you'll learn very quickly after starting Star Rail for the first time, you have skill points in combat. They're generated by basic attacks and spent by skills. Skills are pretty important because it's where you'll find a lot of the actual role that a character is trying to fill. For example, March 7th, the preservation character, shields by using her elemental skill. So it's important that if you plan to use her shield, that you don't want to spend all your skill points before it is her turn. Honkai Star Rail does have elemental bursts in a sense, however they are referred to as ultimates here. They still require energy, however energy is generated not only from your own actions but being hit by enemies as well. Ultimates can be used at any time, even if it is not the current character's turn. It's also not going to do anything to take up that character's turn either. Next is talents. They're combat passives. There's not much else to say about them. Techniques, on the other hand, are used in the overworld and they help you in combat before you ever actually get in combat, and they're limited by technique points, which you start with 3. With Trailblaze level, you'll eventually get up to 5. With some characters having party-wide buffs, or some characters having special attacks that may debuff the enemies in certain ways, it's possible to use many on one enemy. The points are also replenishable by breaking these purple containers in the overworld. Now let's move on to traces. This is basically your skill tree where you're going to gain some new passives, some more meaningful than others, some little stat boosts, some actual doing things major to your character, and you will also level your skills here, which is similar to how you level your talents in Genshin. How quickly you level them is going to be entirely gated by your Trailblaze level, also known as adventure rank as it was in Genshin. One thing you might be wondering is, do you have to make choices here? And no, you will eventually level all of this given enough time and resources. Next up is artifacts, also known as relics in Honkai Star Rail. Except unlike Genshin and every famous fantasy hero, of course, we won't be going into battle with our trusty goblet, hourglass, flower, and feather. How irresponsible of us to leave those behind in combat. You have head, hands, body, and feet. Sounds kind of ridiculous, I know. Then there's 2 planar relics, which are their own separate thing that have their own unique 2-piece bonus that target specific stats. So in the end, you'll either have a 2-piece and a 4-piece bonus or 3 2-piece bonuses. That is the idea anyway. You're also going to be somewhat familiar with what each of these relic slots does. For example, gloves are very similar to your feather. Hat is similar to flower. Body is similar to what circlet was. Link rope and feet are both similar to sands, and planar sphere is going to be our goblet with its unique ability to have elemental damage bonus. Relics still have a main stat. They still can have up to 4 substats just like in Genshin, except unlike in Genshin, a 5-star relic will at max go to level 15 and instead get upgrades every 3 levels. With every rarity, you go down from 5-star having a 3 lower max level than the previous one. And lastly, as far as character building goes, you have eidolons, which are basically 1-to-1 constellations. 3 and 5 will be giving you levels to your various abilities just like in Genshin, and 1, 2, 4, and 6 will be extra effects for your characters. There's not much else to say here. They're earned the exact same way as they are in Genshin through the wishing system, also known as warping in Honkai Star Rail. Your Trailblazer will also get their eidolons for free just like Traveler does in Genshin. Now let's talk about the world of Honkai Honkai Star Rail. It is not an open world like Genshin Impact. You can teleport around to the various areas, but you can't go anywhere you want. You do need to stay within the bounds of the map. However, if what you're more excited for is things like exploration and finding chests and secrets, there is still some of that in Honkai Star Rail. One thing you'll notice is that whenever you open your map in an area, in the top left you'll see a treasure counter. This will keep track of how many chests you have found and whether or not you have found a warp trotter, an elusive enemy that will not fight you, instead will try to flee the battle, so defeat it in time to get rewards. World level and adventure rank are still a thing, they're just known as equilibrium level and trailblaze level here. Resin makes a comeback and is now known as trailblaze power. It has a max amount of 180 and it actually refreshes every 6 minutes opposed to Genshin's 8. And just like in Genshin, it can also be manually refreshed in increments of 60 by 2 different methods, either by the item fuel that can be earned through various methods in game for free, or the Primo Gem equivalent in Star Rail, Stellar Jade. The wishing, aka the warping currency, is the Stellar Jade. This is our Primo Gem equivalent, and of course there's a paid version, the Oniric Shard, which will directly convert into the Stellar Jade. And of course what we're going to be spending these resources on, the warps. Things are mostly the same here as they were in Genshin, but there's one major difference I would like to point out. On the standard banner here, you'll see that you have this thing that gives you a standard 5-star of your choice after 300 warps. That may be a very large number, but considering that there are people who've been playing Genshin for years and still don't have the standard 5-star that they want, this is a very welcomed addition. In the shop, you're going to find a lot of things that are similar to Genshin and some things that look a little bit different. For example, seemingly being able to buy 5-star standard weapons, and you buy these with the resource that you get from warping. Just like Genshin Star Glitter and Stardust, Star Rail has Undying Starlight and Undying Embers. They're both earned from warping, and they buy very similar things to what their counterparts buy in Genshin. Now let's rapid fire some item systems and game modes. Dailies as we knew them in Genshin, gone. Now we have daily training. Pick and choose activities of your choice to add up to 500 and call it a day there. No need to do things you don't necessarily want to do. Adventurer's Journal now is the operation briefing. Very similar thing here, just with a different name. Expeditions have become assignments, and unlike the beginning of Genshin, when you send characters on assignments, they can still be used. Depending on your character's path, they might get a bonus on a specific assignment, and you can send 2 out on each assignment. There's also much more choice on what to send your units on than in Genshin. Ley lines of course make a comeback, and this time they are known as Golden Calyxes, being able to farm character EXP, Light Cone EXP, and credits, the currency that is analogous to Mora. Crimson Calyxes are what we used to know as talent or weapon material domains. The nice thing about Honkai Star Rail is that they actually consolidated talent books and weapon materials. Materials are just for destruction, whether it be a destruction character or a weapon for destruction characters. That of course goes for all the 7 paths as well. Destruction is merely an example. Stagnant Shadows are the world boss equivalents, not weekly bosses, the world bosses for ascension materials. Weekly bosses are still here. The main difference is opposed to Genshin where you can fight each boss once a week. In Star Rail you get 3 clears and you can fight any boss 3 times, or you can fight 3 bosses 1 time. It's up to you. The standard 4 relics are farmed from the Caverns of Corrosion. That means the boots, the gloves, the helm, and the body. Planar relics, on the other hand, are farmed from the simulated universe. This is a mode that doesn't really have a comparison in Genshin Impact. It's a roguelike mode, which is absolutely great. The buffs you get are way better than Spiral Abyss cards, and honestly, it's a lot of fun. There is, however, a Spiral Abyss equivalent on top of the simulated universe, and that is the Forgotten Hall. You'll find very similar restrictions here, as well as the need for 2 different teams. Lastly, there's just a handful of items that I would like to go over that I didn't get a chance to naturally cover as I went through the video. Star Rail Pass and Special Star Rail Pass, now these are our quaint and intertwined fates. One difference between Genshin and Honkai Star Rail is that when you salvage artifacts, well, relics in Star Rail, you get relic EXP materials back, compared to where in Genshin, when you trash artifacts, you get Mora back. And these items you see on screen now, these are our relic EXP. You are going to find items very similar to sigils from Genshin Impact. 2 such examples are shields and Heartarium, and of course you are going to find NPCs that sell items for these currencies. You even get some bonuses for spending certain thresholds, because hey, even in the future when we're riding space trains, capitalism is still going strong. From personal experience with friends and myself, a ton of items being thrown at you and resources you just do not understand can be one of the most daunting things about starting any new game with a lot of things to farm. So hopefully this is going to help you and anyone you share this with maybe not experience that. If you're going to be looking for more Honkai Star Rail content, then maybe stick around. Some more will be made. And don't worry, if you subscribe to me for my Genshin content, it's not going anywhere. Star Rail is just another game I was interested in. I was also very critical of it before I got a chance to play it myself. I both love and can be very critical of turn-based RPGs. Sometimes they can be a little bit shallow and a little bit too easy. Star Rail had me concerned with its minimal abilities. However, I didn't find that to be a problem at all, and I loved the depth. So thanks again to them for sponsoring this video. Thank you to you for watching. Thank you to my members and patrons as always for supporting me, and I'll see you in the next one and in Honkai Star Rail on April 26th.
Attaboy!